Yeah, so this is broadly the format. Please ask questions, and what the broader objective, as I said, while this is the how we're going to do it, the objective is that a journey by in the previous version also. In fact, a year back exactly, we had this session with Mr. Sunil Reddy before the IPO, when there were too much of volatility in the market, and he has shared a lot of things about his vision, which actually have come true. And walking the talk is not something that is generally easy to happen. So we, as I mentioned last time, inspiration always comes from the next benchers, and as I last time remarked, he's a front bencher. So how we can kind of get those pearls of wisdom, that grit, the tenacity, all that have been exhibited and flawlessly executed through the journey. And this is whole idea. So welcome, sir. Thank you for coming on this webinar, and also particularly on a Saturday morning. I know you are pretending to do a 5-day week. I know you work 24 by 7, but I have stolen that pretension from you and pulled you onto this webinar. You need no introduction. I think enough have been spoken all across the media about you, and all the participants know. So I probably would like to skip that part, but want to hand over for your opening remarks.
So thank you very much, Kalyan, for giving me this opportunity. Although you said a lot of nice things, I think life is more simpler, one thing at a time, one step at a time, and keep going at it, and things happen. Front bencher, back bencher. I think I always thought of myself as a backbencher doing things with ease, and I give a lot of credit to saying that it is all, I think, the people around you. If you get the right kind of people around you, like suppose I'm meeting you and you giving me the opportunity to be on a platform, and it's a constant learning that goes on, and that's all there is to it, right? So I am very happy. Maybe I can say, lucky, or intuitively been good luck and all that. That a bunch of good people came together, and that's why this journey has been going on. So with that, I'll leave it open to your questions, Kalyan.
So no, that's a great tone that you've said, sir. Because as we look at it, I mean, the two ways, as Ayn Rand says, are we at the end of a history or beginning of one? I can see a lot of that kind of a tone being said while you're making those opening remarks. For the general benefit of the audience here, very quickly, ladies and gentlemen, Dudla Dairy was incorporated in 1995, commenced operations in 97. The integrated dairy company from procurement, it's an integrated dairy company from procurement, processing, distribution, marketing, sells milk and associated milk products, which are basically the value added products. At the moment, they mostly operate in South India, so far as domestic operation concerned, and of course, we'll hear more about the plans. And they also operate in some African countries. Their products are available in about 11 states. And they're one of the companies which have got early PE investments in what was not considered as a not so glamorous industry, from Protera Investment Partners, which was formerly Black River Asset Management, then TPG, IFC endorsed further, which is like a sovereign. Then, of course, in 2019, SEBI approved their plans, and post the pandemic, you know what has happened, and as they say, rest is history. It's been oversubscribed. I think some 85, 70, these kind of numbers. The overall, it's about 50 times oversubscribed and listed on 28 June 2021. So it's a spectacular journey. So let's try to want to hear. Of course, you've told this on many platforms, but some specific.
कोई बात नहीं सर, वो राजू और कल्याणी में देखते हैं.
Sorry.
No problem.
Okay, sorry for that disturbance. So, how has your journey been through the pre-IPO days?
Kalyan?
So, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Go ahead.
Okay. So to start with, how has your journey been through your pre-IPO days? I mean, of course, you've spoken enough. I mean, when I say pre-IPO, I'm kind of saying that you've traveled with a lot of investors, different kinds, banks, financial institutions, private equities, international sovereign funds, and finally, of course, the public today.
So the journey with the basic thing, I guess, when we started our operations way back in 98, 97, in fact, before Proterra, we had APIDC Venture Capital, which was run by Mr. Sharath Naru in those days at 98, 99, which I got venture capital coming in. And prior to that, my borrowing was from IDBI as an institution. So I think I'm one of the lucky guys that it was the last stage when institutional funding for greenfield projects were available, where you didn't have to worry about whether it was not lending, but it was institutional funding for projects to come in. So at that stage, when we were able to go in, we were knowing the journey is also a lot of hits and misses kind of a scenario. When we went in the early 95, 96, IDBI as an institution had given us a term loan. And those days, there was a concept of bridge capital. That is, if the promoter could only get X amount of money and the balance was missing, you could say that I will go for equity later, and they would give you that bridge with the time for 1 year to raise further equity, and then you could take the borrowing and go forward. So when the regulations changed, when we went in, we got a sanction, we spent what money we had. And then IDBI gave us the remaining money, but rules changed and they said, no, you have to now do your tie-up with your equity. Otherwise, we won't give you further lending. So you were neither here nor there, that you started a project, spent what money you had, and then the regulations changed, and then where do you go? So with that, it started at that time, there was the concept of a small exchange coming in Hyderabad to multiple scenarios. And being stuck without the lack of money, and then you spent whatever money you had, pushes you into other barriers to see where you can go raise the money. And that's how we came across APIDC Venture Capital, and they were nice enough to know. I give a lot of respect to them, but because raising money later was easier because we had a proven track record. Sure. So I guess your first investor who comes on board with you, not believing in you and trusting you and giving you that money is where the crucial thing of the journey starts. And having an investor in the early stage is, I think, the range of why I could go through more of the PEs and then come to a public market. Because from day one, it was taught about to desegregate what is investor. Suppose if I am there, I wear two hats. If I go and sit in the office chair of my designation, I am an operator. I'm a salaried employee doing a job. But when I sit on the board with the equity, then I wear the hat of an investor, where I have to look at my investor return. Understanding that took me a lot of time. It was like saying, is it my company means what, right? What does my company mean? So once you go in this public path, it's no longer my company, it's our company. So to be able to get two other investors, be fair enough to say they have to get their return, like it's a simple thing when we were exiting APIDC, right? At the time when we didn't need money, you don't look at what is written also. And venture capital does come with this huge price. Equity is expensive, it is not cheap. Debt is far cheaper than equity any day when you have to go forward and redeem it or whatever it is. So at that time when I didn't know and I took equity, and when it came to a concept of giving a return, let's say it was costing me 25%. Because of the buyback, the valuations had increased. I used to feel bad saying, why did I do it? Right? And his instinctive reaction was to fight against it, saying, no, you shouldn't, you should, why you shouldn't. And I give Sharath Naru a lot of credit because he was able to explain to me the concept of value, how it goes, what is wealth creation, how you go about it. So I simply follow the thing of being a small piece of a big pie, or rather being a big piece of a small pie scenario. I am more comfortable with the scenario of being a small piece of a big pie because it gives you a lot more knowledge. You associate yourself with a lot more people, and growth becomes much more bigger than what it can be if you bring it down. So in the journey of then going through a private equity and all that, then comes a question of governance, your ability to manage with people, and it helps you because now any knee-jerk reaction decision that I need to make, I cannot do it because the restrictions come into play. But if you start viewing these restrictions as hindrances against your growth, then don't go down that path, right? Be that sole guy, be that high intensity operator that I don't need to. If you're able to manage with 5-10 people and say, I don't mind, I will explain it to it. So what it started as a boardroom with one investor sitting in the board asking questions. And the journey of now becoming a public limited company, when I have, when there's a quarterly analyst meet, or the first meet I did, or the road shows that you do, where you have 50 people or 80 people asking you questions, and your ability to hold cool and answer. So what I've realized is I do not answer, I answer the questions with the intention of saying that this is what I'm doing, and hoping that the answers that I give gets the right kind of investors along with us so that there's no friction later. If I try to please an investor and give him some story that I think he likes to listen, or look at a competitor or look at a share price and say, that is the reason I'm going to tell stories, and not what it is that you're doing genuinely, it hurts in the long run. But if you do what you're doing genuinely, in the short term, it's very painful, but in the long run, it's smooth sailing. For example, like you said, when we filed our DRHP and we had to pull back and then we go back later, the life was easy because what we had promised then, we had delivered.
Right.
We didn't go give some promise for the sake of that time that we're going for a listing or an IPO. So under promise, over deliver, life is comfortable, including private equity or venture capital. Along the way, there is pressure for, like if I'm selling one equity to another person, obviously the guy who's selling that equity wants me to show larger numbers and say, no, you'll do better. You can add that more, you can add this more. Right. I understand because they're trying to get maximum value.
Yeah.
Therefore, now I've learned to be in the range game, right? So I leave it to the other investor who's coming in to understand, saying these are the ranges. If this happens, we reach the higher range. If this happens, we reach the lower range, and therefore we will be at the lower range. And giving them that clarity of that higher or lower range, and then leave the rest to their decision making. So that's what it has been in the journey. So be always saying, no, give actual numbers. Do not hype the numbers for the sake of getting more money. Be willing to share that upside with people and not being worried about they're making money. Be happy with what you're making, right? If my valuation increases and I'm holding a certain size of my company, I should be happy with what my value has increased. I shouldn't be dejected with that somebody else has got more value out of me. Because he's put his money, he's also part of the journey, he's making money. So that's the two things I'll leave it with you, Kalyan.
Sure. Thank you, sir. You've covered a lot of ground out there. You've spoken about what today is more popular as structured debt, structured credit options, which you got much earlier, but where they're very limited, and obviously you were thankful about it. And of course, then you also mentioned about somewhere on the elaborating on the point of you applied and then pulled out for a moment and then got back with a bang. But I mean, the timing part, I'm talking this more from a momentum perspective. Is it important to get the tailwinds? See, private equity and the debt and structured is one, of course, part of the journey, but a different ball game. The timing, etc. And I'm also asking you as an advice to the lot of entrepreneurs on this aspiring, established kind of entrepreneurs also on this call today. There's also impending unknown variables of third wave, fourth wave, etc., which we are also talking about. So timing, and how do you look at it?
So tailwind timing is definitely a great boon to have. It's less stressful on you when you're going for it, and not having a tailwind and then going for a listing is more stressful in terms of, today I think with the banking scenario, with the iBankers in play, with the large funds, the institutions and all that is the easier part of it. When the tailwinds are lacking, I guess more challenge comes from the retail investor to get them on board. Today, the retail investor is a very active retail investor. It's so much more easier to get retail investors coming in. And tailwind that way helps a lot. Institutional investment, whether there is tailwind or no tailwind, is always the easier part of it, right? Out of the universe, I don't know, maybe if there's a 500 institutional universe in the domestic front, and you go ahead with 3 or 4, then they become substantially large. So if it is a smaller issue, it's absolutely no problem because there are so many of the smaller funds that can come in and pick you up. If these are going to be larger issues where you're looking at the bigger size of the raise and bigger thing, and you go into the global play, then it's also a different animal that how you look at it. So it depends on the size of the issue that you're looking at. If the issues are smaller, even though there is no tailwind, it's a much easier sail through. If the issue sizes are larger, then I guess a little bit of tailwind helps in the sailing being smoother. And but I would rather say that the challenge more comes on the valuation numbers. How do you arrive at that number? Whether it is a bad time or a good time. In a bad time also, if you're giving a good number, people will come forward. In a good time, you give an obnoxious number also, you will find it difficult for people to come on board. So I think it is going to be more of the number that you come on. Are you leaving some more on the table for the investors? And if a question is asked, why do you pick a stock number? My stock answer has always been, in my view, what my company will make as a profit, if I take it at this number and over a period of the next 5 years, it has a return potential. Pick any ratio. To whatever ratio you came in at, to that ratio, the next 5 years or the near future, you will make good returns. Now, for some reason, if the market sentiments-wise something happens, you can't hold me responsible. Or as a business operator, I'm responsible for the numbers that I promised as my growth numbers, my projection, my trajectory. And that is what I believe in. And if that number mentally, if I am satisfied, will give a good return to my investor. And investor return expectations can be very high. But if you take a modern day scenario and you have to put a number, maybe between a 12 to an 18% range of number because of the scenario and you're able to deliver. I think that in the long run will help in companies doing well. As your number, the boon of getting more because you're a growth company, people like you, whatever, you're a dividend company, whatever, is the additional bonus that you get. But performance at least must generate something. So the talk shouldn't be the only thing of no multiplication of numbers, but the performance, the base fundamental thing is profit and cash.
Sure.
But generating that and going forward, it's good.
Sure. So one nuance here, you mentioned about the institutional investors. You have dealt with two types of institutional investors broadly. The PE guys, the PE partners, let's call them. And of course, you also had to deal with these anchor investors during your IPO. Now, what fundamentally do you see any difference in the approach, the way you look at it? I mean, can you throw some light on that?
So a PE investor, the horizon of what he looks at is a totally different horizon. He is looking at it at, saying what happens in the next 2 years or 3 years. And there is no cloud of regulation on your head. So life is much more easier with the PE investors. You can show him your next 5-year projections. You can have a chat about it. You can get in his buy-in. You can do all that. Coming to the public world, there are certain restrictions because of SEBI that you cannot do. But to communicate that and going forward with your anchor investors is a little more challenging. How do you communicate that? How do you communicate your growth? How do you look at your numbers? And an average public market investor is slightly little more longer term in view. The good ones, right? The ones who are really there to hold you, for the long haul of that 5-year, 4-year range and wanting to be a serious multiplier. And versus the other public market investors who are there for the flip. So in the anchor investor, for you to identify that who's going to be the flipper and who's going to be the actual holder, because everybody at that point of time, depending on the mood of the markets, will come and say, no, I'm going to be a long-term holder, but not to succumb to temptation when prices go up and then dump your stock and then again getting the prices down, and not to play with it too much, is where you have to be careful about identifying your anchor investors. When it comes to the private equity investors, whether it is private equity or anchor in a certain sense, if you go into the market looking for money when you're desperate, then you're in trouble because you will end up picking anybody who comes your way. But you always, my view has been, go to something when you don't need the money. Then you are in a peaceful state of mind and you will pick and choose what you want. You will stick to your terms and conditions. You will manage your own guns. So my experience with the PE guys has been, other than the first time when I went to APITC Venture Capital when I needed the money, which was when I signed a document without knowing what it was, and then I need money tomorrow, you give me a 30-page document, I don't care, I'll sign. The next round of Protera, TPG to IFC, it is a very clear demarcation of what I expect from them, what they want from me. And it is cherry-picked out of 10 people who come forward to give you money. You spend your time, you go through them, you learn them, and there's a lot of work to be done there. Because at the end of the day, a PE, it's not just the PE, right? It's who's the individual, who's the guy who's going to be talking with you. If it is somebody in a large PE fund and you take it from some other smaller guy and he moves out and new guy comes in, it's like a family or any other business, right? Again, to gel with that guy. Is he a partner of the fund where his association is going to be longer and he understands the ride with you, whether it's good or bad? And PEs are more forgiving. 1 year you don't do well, it's okay, next year is fine. Whereas public markets are not that forgiving, right?
Sure.
Unless your guidance is there. So that's a fundamental difference which will be there. One is more rigid, doesn't give you a choice. You declare some numbers, you give your guidance, you have to stick by it and go forward for it. And that is not very forgiving. PEs are more forgiving and but more in terms of more detail, more depth, more questioning, more answering. So that's the two differences. But I don't think you should jump straight into public markets. You should go through at least one round of PE because it gets that governance question, the sharing question before you go to the public markets.
No, in fact, that's what is my next question about. What kind of an investor you need to have? Is it a function of what kind of application of funds you've got to do? If yes, can you throw some light? For example, you have also picked up traditional bank debt. You also picked up debt from, developmental funds. You've picked up, of course, very high in growth capital, mezzanine debt. Now, of course, the IPO. I mean, can you throw some light on the relationship?
So it's very simple, Kalyan. Whatever you want to do in your view of time frame, right? When you're picking up the money, So right, when I picked up my TPG, I've not picked it up from more than a money point of view because it was more of Proterra buying it over. But Proterra was more an operationally intensive PE. Like I want to start a dairy farm. Oh, we have a dairy farm in China. We'll get you people from there. We'll get you here. TPG is more, let me put it in a way, more of the higher end of the operation, right? They have larger, better people who are sitting out, who are like Zubin Irani, who ran large companies and who's now their operating head. They come and put in more structures, the more, the support functions, like let's say a HR intervention that is needed to be done, a strategic intervention that you want to do. So although I'm throwing these words, 5 years ago, if somebody had come and talked to me about saying vision, mission, strategy, I would laugh and say, all these guys are MBA guys, they don't know what they're talking about. It doesn't make a difference. But then getting associated to the TPG and the word strategy, meaning that, no, okay, you're taking money from me for 5 years. What do you mean you want to do with this money? What do you want to get out of it? Is when that word strategy starts to make more sense, right? It's not just the buzzword of strategy, but starts moving you from earlier when you're an operator, it's next year to next year. And I know this month to next month, the next month onwards, maybe to a quarter. Then you look at a year, will I get out of this trouble? Will I start more? Will I grow more? Then when you go to somebody like a TPG, that's finally thing expands to a much larger scenario. Where do you want to be 5 years hence? And when I go to a public market, because public markets, unless you really want to continue your growth journey, you shouldn't go to public markets. Why should you go to public market? Right? Public market rewards you as much as, you stay there for the long haul, you continue a constant development, you're there and you deliver a lot more. Public markets reward you a lot more in terms of the value you get home. So that is where I think it is, right? So when your ability of picking money, when you want money and how you want money is entirely proportionate to your thought process. When I was a short-term thinker, I would go for debt. I would rather go, when I became slightly little longer term, the mess comes into play, right? Because it's structured, I can play with it. I can say later I'll replace with it. Then from there, when I go and say I want long term, I'm going to get more money into, then I go to the public markets. Because today, if I deliver money if I deliver my company well in the public markets, and I need money, the ability to raise money once you're in the public markets and you're viewed as a good company, money no longer is a constraint. There's so much of money lying in the system that you can take that money anytime you want, and you can go and take it into your operations and deliver. But to build it to that stage, you have to go through the process. You cannot short circuit and try to jump into something dramatically.
Sure, absolutely. So what, and of course, that also gives a lot of questions that I have around what are your plans with this money, which of course you've spoken many times. We'll come back to that later. But before that, on the IPO journey itself, during the process of, dealing with regulators, the bankers, the road shows, the snags, and anything that you wanted to share?
That is, it's like any other journey. So you'll have enough number of ups and downs. One day will be a great day. The next day will be a bad day. It is as good as saying, fixing a date for going, getting yourself listed. My old psyche of good day, bad day. Then some regulatory issue will pop up and that goes out of the window. Then you have to go on a bad day for a listing. As simple as that. To the calls of whom you pick as people. It hurts sometimes, you pick a banker, you think they're going to do an extremely great job. Your expectations are something, maybe they don't deliver. Some of them over deliver than what you expected, and the way they take care of you and the way it goes forward. So I think there are a lot of ups and downs, but do your research is what I would tell people, right? If somebody you say, I want to pick a banker to be my guy who's going to take it. Why are you picking, right? There will be multiple reasons you look at it. If it is coming as a push that they came and pushed it on you and therefore you accepted something, then you are in trouble. But if you are clear with what you want and then go looking around for people whom you think you want, these kind of people, then you get the right mix of people that you need. This, you have both the options, right? I can take the fanciest of the bankers who can deliver phenomenally wonderful things, but me or our organization must also be in the same wavelength to cope with them, right? So that is where I think it is that you have to go out there, not expect, don't get carried away by a push of someone. And the same thing is a PE. If your PE guy is pushing you to say, go for listing or go for that, and you're going for the sake of him, then you're in trouble. You must also buy it, right? Why is he asking me to go for a listing? Why shouldn't I go for a listing? And then you go. If you're not ready, always flip. Get another PE guy till you're ready. There's no gun to your head that I must give an exit only through an IPO. I can always give it through another PE guy. Then take it there. I can be in the private markets for all my life. I don't need to go to the public markets. So if you're going from the private to the public, be clear in your thing of why I want to go, your reasoning, and everybody will have their own reasonings, and then you can go for it.
Yeah. So talking about the reasoning motives for one to go to public, of course, as you explained, it's very arduous journey, and it's been so for all the guys who go public. Talking about the motives themselves, one of the motives you mentioned, of course, is if you want to continue growing. Let's say at the moment of truth, whether you want to go for a bigger private equity versus IPO, what drove you in general? For example, the reason I'm asking you, sir, is also because the motives can range as much as, look, I want a much larger money. It's got a risk rate. There's a very scientific thinking about it. To something like, I want to be the chairman of a listed company. It's my childhood dream.
No,
So,
Kalinda, I think I took it as my own view that I've lived the journey of PE and the contribution that just sitting in a boardroom of 4 people, the organization's necessity was no longer there. A simple example, when now I have to declare a result, I am in the competitive sphere of looking at my peers, seeing what's happening, what's going on, not only me, the whole organization per se. At a point of time, I needed the PE. When I was a single guy sitting in our board with our own people, the pressure you build up, the thinking you thought was smaller. Then you went the PE journey where they talk to you about the next 5 years, will you double your revenue, where will you go, how will you do, was that part of the journey. But after being with PEs for 10 years, there's no more, contribution that can come from them. Like I told you, right, Proterra was more operational, then these guys were more HR, more of the softer skills. Now, once you're ready for that, then you're jumping into the public world, which is a much larger platform for you to go and grow and develop. So from my view, I went from an operational point of view that it helps me. It's like, suppose I was making a huge profit in the company when I was individual. My thought process, I would splurge it to do what I want. Right from my personal side, I could buy what I want, I could spend what I want. When I went to the PE world, it comes under a bit of scrutiny. Why are you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? And when you come into the public world, that scrutiny is much larger. Now, if I need to do something, either I can smell only a small portion of my equity, or I must live on my salary, or the company must declare a dividend, which is not meant for me. And for me to do that, I must get the general buy-in of everybody, right? I can't do what I want. So I think at the stage of Dodla, I went there saying that now we need this, more of the scrutiny, more of this as we grow along the way. It's been a 25-year journey, and no one person can be at the helm forever and things can go on. Now, being in this world, this process, this structure will help us grow better as a company. So it is not from a money point of view, but more from a company requirement in terms of the money being one, but operational scrutiny, the ESG coming into play, all that will help us go further.
Sir, one again, organization building related question, very interesting. At what point in the journey did you start focusing on building your team to manage needs of growth phase, etc.? So when that, as you said, from operating month to month to a kind of a vision thing came within your controllable variables, I'm saying.
So where it came in, says the first day you got out of the rut of money. I'm saying the first 2 years, I was very, very poor in terms of debt servicing itself was painful. At that point of time, if I get a creditor sitting in front of me and I cannot pay, you cannot talk about all this, I want to build company, team, organization, doesn't happen. So once you move out of that and you start making a little bit of money and there is a little bit of surplus that is available for you, that is when I think from a promoter point of view, it comes to your view, right? So for me, at an early stage, life became comfortable because thankfully for me, my parents had given me my personal luxuries, meaning I had a house to live in. So I appreciate other promoters who build personal and a company because it's very difficult. You start something along the way, you're making a little money to build your own personal wealth and also build a company is very difficult. For me, it became easier because my wife was working, she was able to help me out with whatever we did on the personal side. My parents gave me a lot of, the basic requirements were already taken care of. So I had a clean run in the early days was that when we made those little money for it to be used more into the company and put it rather than I had to take it for the personal requirements. And therefore it is the ability to build the organization to grow the company starts. And once you get money and you grow the organization a little bigger, you immediately feel the pinch of, the need for change of the organization. It has to get more people. But if you can't afford it, you won't experiment it. Now then the PEs come into play. That's when you get even more money and there's a lot of money to be thrown behind you. So for example, when Dodla's thing, when Proterra came in with money, till that time it was also saying if I want to do a larger operation, I would only think of what money I was making with a slightly leveraging of debt. But when the PE came in, he would say, what, you want to buy something, you want another 100 crore check? I'll give you a 100 crore check. In the days when you're making a 20 crore profit. Sure. And then your thought process starts to expand. Then it's no longer money. Now, once it is no longer money, then your thing is, then why am I not growing? Then it becomes saying, okay, I have to build my organization because the people that matter, then the process that matters, then the system that matters. So in that phase of growth, I think at every stage you keep learning. So there is no precise timing when you become professional. But fundamentally, once you get the little luxury of money, you can start, it'll start at that, because then it depends on what you do with that money. If you say that I'm going to use it for my personal thing, yes, the growth of the company will be delayed longer because it requires to build it up, and then you have the surplus to start deploying it. But I see a lot of people who have the guts to be able to leverage at a very early stage also, right? And those are the guys who do extremely well. But that also has a risk of a drop happening, right? One mistake, if you're highly leveraged, can take a heavy toll on you. So it's a call as an individual. That's what I told you. I'm a backbencher. I don't have that risk. I rather have a little more comfortable life than a risk appetite of leveraging heavily and then facing that risk if something goes wrong. Personally, I'm not that. Maybe that is the reason it's taken us 25 years. Maybe somebody who had a larger risk appetite could have delivered much bigger and much faster. So it's an individual call then, as when you grow, at what risk levels you take.
No, very important insights. I think broadly it is very, very individual specific, organization specific, situation specific. One should probably be in a position to, and affordability to take that call. So a few things. On the organization decision making and execution today, and as you said right at the beginning, as an operator, it is all your signature is there everywhere on the company. Then it slowly started more PE, board driven. Now it is decision making. So how do you handle that part of you?
That part of it is nothing, sir. If you take your ego out of the equation, that part becomes easier. If you think you know everything, then the problem is big, right? Then you want to know everything and you can't let go. At some point of time, you will have to start saying that you're not the only one who knows everything. There are multiple people who know better than you. And then you are there looking at it and listening to it. Then you metamorphose. It's like a father and son. Like my dad at an earlier point of time, every little thing I would do, he would be looking at me saying that, do you know how you're doing it? You're not knowing. Once you know that they're able to do well, then you give them wings to fly. So similarly, within the organization, it's the same thing. So earlier, when we had no treasury and no investment, it was not an issue. Then once I get treasury, I'm very keen on looking at, oh my God, will they invest it in something wrong, and then money will go away and it won't be there. But then once you build that team and they come back, then you realize they know a lot more than you. They have a lot of knowledge, they know that is how you're doing it. And once you're growing, too many things come across your way if you don't let go, and then you can never grow. Because if you're 24 hours on the phone making every call yourself and every decision yourself, a human being has only a limited bandwidth, and after that it starts to petter around. So that is what I said in the growth journey. When you get a PE guy, they take you somewhere else and you see, I think it's what you do, Kalyan. When you make people meet people, you meet somebody who's done extremely well, and then you stand top. Anybody else wants to bring forth? Okay, so I think Kalyan dropped off, so I'll just continue with this. I see the question of the PE journey actually helping us to make bold decisions. I think PEs do help you make bold decisions because they come from that investor mindset and not from that ownership mindset. And when people question you saying, why can't you deliver more? That is when your thinking also starts to expand, right? When somebody comes to you and says, for example, when I was going in this PE route, I had met somebody from Sequoia who had come. And so I really love the gentleman. He had just come from San Francisco and he was just sitting there and having a chat with me because he happened to be there and he wanted to know. And he was an amazing gentleman who comes and says, if Dodla at that point of time was a fraction of a market share, the market was huge, and I'm going and saying I have this dream of building it up to twice where I am, and therefore I need private equity money. The gentleman asked me the question of, forget about what your dream is, the markets, and if you're 0.5 and I want you to be 25% of market share, why do you think you can't grow there? I was like hesitant and I said, what do I mean? He said, is it money? I said, yeah, assume the money is given to you. What do you do next? And then I realized it was not just the money that you couldn't let you grow. It was a bunch of skills that are required. Then he came and said, if you want to be in the lead of that, what do you want to do? Is it, what is your next sphere after money? Then it came to me saying, oh, what about my family? Yeah, I've done the PE part of the question.
Yeah, sure. I was actually there, but the video was off. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that.
Okay.
Um, so I just wanted to ask a few questions on how you handled personally during this period. Were there any stress moments? Obviously, you have explained that there is a lot of volatility. One day was good, one day was bad. During IPO process in particular, but overall, any advice to the aspiring entrepreneurs on how to deal with what's the kind of a temperament you need when you're dealing with capital market? The operations, of course, is in your control.
I think it is going to be a patience game, a little bit of language skill that is required, and also that ability to curtail yourself. See, before when somebody would ask me about the future, I would jump into numbers. I'll say this, that, this. Now to be able to say, we will do good, we will grow, and not to commit to something substantially because people hold you on to that. You can't make a generalized statement because the public markets give value to what you're saying, and then the markets move on that. To be very curtailed in what you're saying in a manner which is just right enough, not too much because you're not there to spin stories, but give some factual thing, a word. And the bigger thing of the stress or the strain of public market, earlier you were in your boardroom, whether you did well or not didn't make a difference. Now you're out there in the public world where everybody is looking at it, and you'll have a range of questions. Somebody who gets hurt will be upset and ask you a question. You must be patient enough to be able to explain it to him and not get angry about it or lose your temper. Nowadays it's easier thanks to Zoom that like you're doing, you mute all, you say a question, you type, I can see, I can answer, I can do it more contained and controlled. In the earlier days, I guess it would have been more tougher if you're doing a live session and when somebody throws something at you, the ability to say either I don't know, I'll find out, or you have your team who backs you up with giving you what knowledge is required. So you need all that to be put into place and go forward. Like now an AGM for Dodla was breeze. But now an AGM has its own issues because somebody can ask you a question. You must be prepared to answer it. For example, I'm always saying that if somebody says, are you capable of running as a company? What should I answer? Yes, I should answer something, right? Being able to say, yes, I have this is my answer. I cannot go and say, this is my company, I won't answer it. So you're becoming more the public face. And it does have its own pains. Like when the PEs came in, I don't know whether I told it earlier, it was my credit card was a company credit card. It's a very different thing when you go and saying it's my company when you start with. And along the journey, that you get your auditor who comes and you say you swiped your credit card for somewhere where you had lunch or dinner. And he says, sir, there are 5 lunches. Can you justify this lunch for me as it's a company expense or a personal expense? It takes you time to get over that, right? And then you learn to have 2 credit cards. If it's company, you swipe. That later, if somebody questions you on that day, what happened? Why did this money be spent? I'm just taking a very simple analogy of the example. By being able to say, yes, I met so-and-so, a banker had come, I took him out for lunch, I swiped it. And not to get stuck with, no, I don't know what I did. I went with my wife, but that is not company expense. So to maintain that differential, like I told you, the 2 hats of when you sit in the chair, you're as an operator, you're an operator. When you sit in the chair of the investor, you're the investor. And answering questions, seeing where they come from. If they're coming from the investor angle, it's a different animal altogether. Your own operations as an operator is a different angle altogether.
Somebody has a question about specifically about that SBI mutual fund being there with you. And I remember you also sharing some very interesting, which you liked personally during the journey. So for the benefit of audience, if you can share that part.
So he's one of the investors. So we have other investors who came in, but the SBI coming into the journey, I really appreciate the amount of work these guys are putting, right? Earlier I had now I never put money into mutual funds earlier, but now I think I can put my SIPs and they are safe enough and that they're not going to go anywhere. Because when I went through my public journey, seeing the amount of effort that was put in. Like you would take a CIO of a large fund which sits with that 1 lakh crores of money or 50,000 crores of money, the ability of them and having the humility of coming down to your level, questioning you, the amount of work they put through, it's great. So now I look at them as my good consultants I've got for free, or rather they paid me money and they're acting as my for my benefit because they analyze you the way they question you. But again, I bring it back to, if you get angry about it, you're irrational about it, it doesn't help you. But if you look at it in the positive sense, okay, why is he asking me that question? Why is it right or why is it wrong? And then it also helps you, right? If you're wrong, having the ability to say, yes, I'm wrong. Now I look into it. Thank you for telling me so. So guys like these who are genuinely putting in a lot of effort are not visible in the open.
Sure.
But Imagine a fund manager trying to come and in the COVID days saying, I want to come, I want to go see what you mean by a chilling center, I want to go see what do you mean by a cow, I want to go see what do you mean by your plant, and then making a call for investment. There's a lot of work these guys have to put in, right? It's not just that they're spraying money and looking at it, go to some guru.com, see some 10 numbers of past performance and make a bet on that. These guys are genuinely putting work. They know, and without our knowledge, they go meet our suppliers, they meet our... I was very surprised. One of the funds had also gone and met a hiring agency that we were using to see why talent comes into Dodla or not, why is talent leaving from Dodla. So each one of them has their own view and they put in a lot of effort. So I think mutual funds, good funds which are coming in and putting the effort, you shouldn't be scared of them. You should welcome them. You shouldn't look at them as these guys asking me too many questions. He's doing it for your benefit. So it was the same thing which I started dairy. My dad told me about the project report of the old days, right? Project report, you used to go to a consultant, you would make it so that all the ratios were met for a bank to lend.
Yeah.
My dad told me that, no, don't do that mistake, because if the bank is looking at it, it's their money, they're treating it as their money and it's like your own money. Put what is real. Then the bank gives you money, then you'll be happy that what you put it out as real, that somebody else is approving it, right? It's the same thing with the funds which are coming in as investors. Be real in what it is. If they come to you, then they're going to stay with you. Tomorrow, if some reason, if it doesn't do well, and if you had told them earlier that I cannot do well if this scenario happens, and if it is that scenario, you're on a call, the guy says, what happened? It's like the scenarios we always told you. This is what happened. Your life is comfort. So that is where it comes in. The mutual fund guys who put in a lot of effort, might seem to be painful, but please, when you come from the other side, if you're a guy who put money into that mutual fund, you should be very happy he's doing so much of work, right?
Sure.
So I think that is what I meant by them. So good funds are always nice to have.
Sure. So your journey has been, of course, from a rural, of course, the business itself is like the rural to the today urban. So going forward, the more appealing product lines. There's only one question probably I'll ask about your specific growth plans, because you've spoken enough across. But today it's more like the urban population, the organic is what people are more talking about. What are your plans towards those? You're talking about desi cows, A2 milk, all that. What are your plans about that?
So I'll give it as an example, because as I said, nowadays I'm more cautious about my future plans that I'm not supposed to be there. But as we go forward, if you look at it as 5 years ago, curd didn't form maybe 1% of a sale. Curd now has become almost, a larger part of a sale volume that is big. People have started buying curd instead of making curd at home. Trends in the markets keep coming in, the trends keep changing of A2 milk, vegan milk, I don't know, maybe synthetic milk in the future, which is healthy for you, which is already a lot of research going on elsewhere. But as a company, we are there, we are processing, we are procuring, we are marketing and distributing. It is only to be cautious about the capital we deploy in these areas, right? So I can go and say, I will create we have a farm in Pulivendala, which we are doing a lot of farm with 400 animals. We get 5,000 liters of very high quality milk. When is it that you need to take it to the market? What is the return on capital that you deploy? Rather than doing it just for the sake of it. We rather go in that angle of we wait and watch, let somebody else be a trendsetter. If they're able to create a category, we are very good operationally to say that we can step into that category very quickly and go and get the market share. We might not be the market leader, but we're very capable of following. So that is a trend we follow. Trends keep coming, going. But when a trend stays for a while and it's moving forward is when we go in.
In other words, you're looking for inorganic growth into organic.
Yeah,
Yes.
sort of.
Right, sure. And any thoughts on exports also? Are you looking to expand your export portfolio?
Not exports, international operations that we have in Africa, for example. We're very cautious, makes good money, but also it's got the risk of country risks and all that are there. So we get a very good opportunity where if I go across the borders into countries where we think we know a little more of the risk profile, we look at the profitability. If the profitability is high and I can return my capital, what I've deployed there in a year or two, we don't mind taking that risk. So until we find such opportunity, we don't go there. Domestically, we don't mind looking at a 5 or a 6 year repayment on whatever capital we deploy to get our returns on the asset, and therefore if it's an acquisition that we do, that if we can get it and then we add our efficiencies to it and bring it down. So I'm of the old school, very clearly looking at the return on the capital that we deploy, coming back to us as cash.
So talking about the school, right? Somebody has mentioned on the chat, you got an achievable journey starting from your own money, then getting into some debt. After you got some equity support, you got a good debt equity. Even today, you are maintaining very low debt equity. You mentioned that the IPO proceeds were used to retire debt, etc. Talking about the school and coming to what can specifically be taken on similar businesses in this part of the country for you to be to be looked up to, and as we said in the past, and of course there is always a bit of there's been a bit of reputational issue around the Hyderabad based promoters, and during at the time when you were doing, there are 2 or 3 successful IPOs coming from Hyderabad itself, of course. And any what is the starting point? What are things one should keep in mind? You spoke about family wisdom. You spoke about family value system, your own character, etc., etc. But for somebody starting here, some pearls of thought from you.
Sir, I think it's dependent on every individual as what they go and what they do, sir. I had a friend who taught me that word, were you into the legacy business, or are you into the economic business? So very simply saying, I'm in saying, I want to make money, I want to make 1,000 crores. That is what I broadly bring it down. No, I'm here to build a company which continues to grow and establish. I might be a part of the journey. If I'm not capable, I might drop out of the journey. This is how I look at it, sir. I bucket it into 2. Suppose today I'm saying I want to build Dodla. I might be there as majority promoter for some reason if I'm not capable and I'm moved out or whatever. But the intention is to say that the entity should go forward being built. So having both is very difficult. It's like having the cake and eating it too. That takes really long time and energy to build. To say that I will make enough money. Maybe it will happen in certain generation, but that is the journey, right? Which is said 25 years, first 15 years was not making money. But 25th year, you make a little money. But if I look at the company makes far more money that I can ever make personally. But if I go into the aim of making money personally, then it should be the strategic sale of a company. I'm building a company towards that. Therefore, I want the personal money. So that depends on the individual. So that's my 2 things, right? If you're out to build something which is lasting longer and you're part of the journey, and I'm not saying you're a saint there, right? You make your money too, but not depends on how much you want to make. So for us, I'm comfortable with a smaller chunk of money, a larger organization, and being a part of it, rather than a large chunk of money and having a small role in any organization or doing multiple other things. So I have good friends who are serial entrepreneurs. For them, they hate this building business. They rather build, sell, build. So that's an individual trait of what you want to do. If I'm a hardcore operator kind of a guy, I would rather go into the serial entrepreneur business, right? I like to keep operationally intensive, and some guy gives me some money which doesn't make sense, which I can never make in my life, and he's offering it to me. I should give it and start another one. But if I'm not of the mindset of being operationally intense, but a guy who just puts something together, builds, likes to build things at a slow, steady pace, builds and grows, then you go into the game of building. So it's an individual preference of what you do when you do. And once that preference, you can't get that preference when you're 23-year-old, right? It is at different stages of life, things start to change. When I'm growing, I needed money for my survival. Once that gets taken care of, we start talking of growth. Now, I'm lucky that I have 2 daughters, and I got married early. Now my daughters are settled. Now I can talk a lot more wisdom. Right? But if that was not there and I needed money, my kids have to get married, if I had 5 sons where they have to get settled, my wisdom would be different at that point of time, thinking, I need more money to settle my kids or whatever it is. So each person's life, when they are, what they are, the scenarios are different. So that way I keep saying I'm very lucky, right? Parents were right. My wife was supportive of me. Then I went along in the organization. Good people came together. So a lot of things fell into place. It's not that it's a genius of one. It's a lot of multiple things that fall into place, and then things move forward.
Sure. But of course, how you bring everything together matters a lot. Any thoughts on regulatory support the industry would need, or any government policy? Now, of course, because the reason I'm asking you is also now, as you said, you can now afford to kind of your correlation with the macros are far higher after last month, right?
So what happens when it comes as government policy and all that? Earlier, I used to be very cynical about government. I would say, oh, government is very bad. No, they're always out there to mess up with you. They don't do this. I pay taxes, but they don't build roads. But I don't do this. I don't do that. Sure. But now once you go into public markets, public worlds, you also realize that the expectations are so high. You can only do this much. There's inefficiencies you have to do. So when it comes to that, now we have to view it more pragmatically by saying, okay, why is this policy for? Why is it helping? Is it blatantly a policy targeted at you per se? Then it is good. So if I look at it as India, for me, from a dairy industry, we are an offshoot of, let's say, the PV Narasimha Rao Atal Bihari regime, of the socialism of cooperative movement becoming liberalized to a private sector. I think now as we go forward, we are again confused whether we are going to go back to the socialistic system or move the capitalistic agenda forward. Like if more and more restrictions come into place, then you're going back into the socialistic system, in which world a capitalistic kind of an operation won't do well. So that is where I think once you look at government and policy, now when you grow older and you do a lot more and your involvement as you go into the public markets, when people question you, what will happen if that happens, then you think about it, then you talk to more people about it. That is when you get that policy of thinking, where do you go? No, is it going to be hurting you in the long run? And from there, like you said, Africa, for me, when I started Nellore as a district, we went to Chittor as de-risking from one district to another district. If I don't get milk here, I'll get milk there. Then you de-risk markets by growing. Now you're de-risking countries, saying, oh, what happens if I get kicked out of India? I can have an operation somewhere else. So at different stages, you look at government policies with different views and how you go. And I think as a democratic, we're in a pretty good spot. Like in India, I didn't realize till recently that every government policy that is there, it is put on a website. You as a citizen can go on and give your comments to it. They reply to you as to why they shouldn't do it or why they should do it. But when the FSSA Act came in, for example, and a 500K page document came and said, give your opinion for it from the industry, I didn't bother to read it. And later when the act comes into play and there are 2 lines which are going against it and we didn't like it, oh, I was cribbing. How can they do that? I didn't read it. I didn't put my effort of highlighting it and saying this is wrong for the dairy industry. How can I complain about it? Yeah. So that way we have to be aware as we grow bigger in size. When you're small, these things don't bother you. But as you keep growing in size, you have to be careful about what you're doing, how you do. It is like I said, right? If I'm now, when I say the word ESG comes more and more, the negative energy, if you're going to be in 10 different locations and you're operating and you don't follow the rule of a law and you're getting irritated by some governance issue. I mean, it's an issue, right? Suppose if there is a small issue and let's say it's an accident. The local police station says, I want to meet your MD. Now you sitting in some chair somewhere, you will get very upset saying, what does it mean that some place, where do I go, how do I go and what do you do? But you'll have to do by law because it will say the guy who is there as direct responsible is held liable and you have to go there. But the amount of energy it draws down is extensive for issues. But instead of that, you make sure that no, you follow law, you follow process, you follow procedure. You don't get dragged down that hole and you do better with your operation than the work that you do. So learn to live by government policies. If you have a problem with it, go with it the right way. Don't try to do the shortcuts. It doesn't help you in the long run. Sure. Initially, it seems great, but it bites you back in the long run.
Sure. I think also fits with your broader philosophy. You're talking about ESG, you mentioned. There's one question around how do you kind of take care of all the internal stakeholders as a complete ecosystem? For example, farmers. Is there any written, unwritten policy practice?
See, what I'm saying, so we normally pick up everything. I think my way of looking at it is very simple. If I put myself into the other guy's shoes, am I doing it right or wrong? If I think it is right, I follow it, right? I don't think if it has anything more, in a very, very broad sense.
Sure.
Like when I'm buying milk from a farmer, I buy milk without saying as far as I think in our entire history, we have never stopped procurement, whether there's surplus, shortage or whatever for us we do. Yes, prices are higher or lower. Sometimes I pay a price which is lower. Sometimes I pay a price which can be market driven, which can be any driven. So I think my view is the farmer is also in the business, right? It is not that I'm forcing him to give it to me at some price at a gunpoint or whatever. He's got competition. If I don't perform well, he'll go elsewhere. Therefore, I must be aware of that. But I will not try to cheat him by saying I'll do some manipulation so that he will not be there. And that has put us in the long run. It has been done well. I mean, this is again very early in time, but we got somebody from the World Bank who came in. And in India, every village, we improve our testing mechanism. We put more and more money in testing. And that guy was saying, guys, what's wrong with you? Why is there so much of mistrust? The farmer doesn't believe the agent doesn't believe the company doesn't believe the agent. Why are you guys building this mistrust system and depending so much more on tests and process and procedure that to avoid it, rather than doing a more efficiency operation? Why is it that you guys don't trust each other? And for me, I believe that is the biggest problem that we have, that we don't trust everybody. We're not able to build the trust ecosystem. It is always that you're viewed as a thief and therefore you behave. Not that if you are a thief, I'll punish you.
Sure.
I think in a larger thing like this farming to build that, because most of you would know it's a quality issue, right? Some farmer might add some adulterant. So being a speck somewhere is okay, but if it becomes an epidemic and you're always fighting against it, then you're doing something wrong. But if you're able to create the process of that farmer understanding that what he is doing is damaging, and you make to understand is what you must build.
Sure, sure, sure. I mean, achieving that at a scale, I think, is what you have done, probably cracked. So I think the questions are pouring in, but with respect to the time, I'll just ask you a few last questions. Um, People have questions about what are, I can see some books behind you. So what are the books that inspired you, or people who inspired you? One person and one book, or maybe a couple of them.
Sir, I read the thing of Tata Blue Steel was the one which I read way, a little earlier in time. Before that was, when you read Warren Buffett's book, it was very easy because before starting anything, I thought I'll be smart and I can just put money and it'll come in return. But then you read saying the fundamentals must be there. That is why I say, right, cash has to be the king. And I think more than remembering, it's like now the good to great that is there as a book that has come, which the guys come and say that if you're a good company, you'll never become a great company because you can't shake off the lethargy of being good. Then there's another thing by Bain Capital, which I read recently, which the guys keep coming and talking about the fundamentals of what makes a family kind of a business. When it grows big, what is lost? Right. So, but one thing I would say that it's a good question that you brought up about books. I found a man called Mr. KV Rao, who was basically a HR professional of IMA, and who was there. We had taken him one time for Dodla HR, and he put it into my head, saying, Sunil, if you want to head something or you want to be on the top and making a decision, always remember last year to this year, what is one thing new that you have learned? You read a book, you've learned something. If you are not learning, how can you be ahead of the curve and how can you be going ahead? So you have to make time to learn. Attend one course. Now, today I just saw one question about online. It worries me a lot more, right? I'm becoming more the old dinosaur who only recently during COVID time started buying things from Amazon.
Right.
But how do I now go and say that I have to learn to be on Insta, I have to learn to be on Twitter to understand how it is, because a lot of the new age marketing is going there. And so the books, reading, learning has to be a constant curve. Otherwise, you'll start losing out.
Sure. And person? One or two people who have inspired you?
For me, my biggest thing has always been my dad, who has been, always a gentleman who had done a lot of things. When I was starting Dodla, whatever he was doing was crashing. But having that compartmentalization ability of moving the thing, saying that, okay, you start something new when something else is burning and we might not have any more money to do. Selling an asset and giving that money and saying, going forward and doing. Starts with him. My grandfather, who was very particular about the discipline of accounting of a balance sheet by saying, he used to say in Telugu, Manadab. He meant the asset and the liability part of it, of being very clear on where is it if you don't know what it is. I owe a lot of people along the way. Like I said, when it came into APIDC Venture Capital, was Sharath who was there, who taught me this world of equity, why not equity. I have a friend called Sandeep who runs People Capital, who put it into my head that equity is accelerator money. You can't take equity and be chilled about it. So there's Ajit Isaac of Quest, whom we studied together, or Sharath from Unify. So it's nice to be being with people who have done well in life, and when they are able to give you advice on what's going on. And I think the latest person I met before going IPO was GV Prasad of Dr. Reddy. So I'd met him somewhere. He comes from where I come from, and I was saying, should I go IPO? Shouldn't I go IPO? Like what he was saying. Yeah. He was saying there is no hard and fast rule. Take life as it comes. You do things when you require. Things will follow. Hindsight, you'll have so many things that will come up by saying, if I'm doing well, maybe I shouldn't have gone, I should have gone. But at the point of time when you make a call, make it with full conviction and go forward. There is nothing else you can do. So these are lots of people along the way. Everybody had their own, right from a couple of teachers in school to, and each one is playing their own role, right? My wife plays a major role, not harassing me in the first 15 years of growth that I want this or I didn't want that. Like I said, so there's not one. No, but I am a strong believer of strong family anchor. If that is not there, it becomes more difficult because you have a lot more issues coming up.
No, absolutely. One of the reasons, why, this particular session is so important, because again, the cost of repetition, saying that inspiration can always come from, I remember Warren Buffett once saying, everybody in the world thinks that they can do what I can do, but they don't think they can do what Bill Gates did. So they feel it's so simple. Everybody wants to be a Warren Buffett, right? So it can be as ridiculous as that when you have inspiration coming from people who are really, really far away from your understanding, but nothing like talking to people on that note. Sir, I think you are a great inspiration to a lot of people. You have done very well. You made all of us so proud in the sense of where you have reached. for the entrepreneurs particularly. And yeah, maybe you were a backbencher in your schooling days, maybe because of your height. I don't know, but surely on the
And
on
I'm
the
saying, take life a little at a comfortable pace. Don't try to stress yourself. If something is stressing you, then it's not right for you, is what I mean by backbencher.
sure, sure,
Right
sure.
now, if you're a
I'm
good
just
student,
putting
if you read something, it comes at ease. It's not a stress, right? I'm
right.
sure we would have all faced that guy. He didn't study, but he did better than me kind. But I think it's our job to find what is less stressful for us and makes us grow.
Sure, sure. So yeah, absolutely. I'm fully with you. But looking at you, any one last piece of advice to specific to people coming from this part of the country, from the Telugu states or this region.
So we are a young states coming into this world of business. Like when I go to Bombay and I see a number of people talking of money, evaluation, PE, multiple, and all that. In my growing days in these stages, we never thought about that. We were always hard work. It was like if I have a factory, I must go there, sit in the morning, 8 o'clock, come back. That was what it meant. That is my view. So I might be wrong. We were brought up with that intention of because we were not an industrial state where we saw things growing, things being built along the way. There is no reason why we can't be that. The IT sector, we have shown to be leaders. We have shown to be leaders in the pharma sector. So every sector has that ability. It is only that our association has to grow. I mean, that is when it comes by being with multiple people. Like today, when I was saying the same thing of IPO, being with the PE guys, Bombay has become comfortable. Otherwise, if I go to Bombay and you're, I don't know that, what do you call that, near the airport, you're the financial area of Bombay. I
BKC,
didn't know it. Huh?
BKC, Bandra Kurla.
BKC, like BKC was a new world for me, right? Now BKC is BKC, right? You entered there, you know what it is. They're human beings like you are, but they're in a different mindset. I think we are in the mindset of a lot of effort, hard work, and not trying to do it ourselves rather than being able to expand it into a larger entity and bigger. That is something we'll have to learn. We might fail, we'll learn, but in the process, we will also go forward. There will be entities that will come out. In the same breath, Hyderabad has got the best pharma guys. And you also had some issues going. So it's everywhere, but we are smaller in a smaller city by comparison. I guess therefore word spreads faster and we blow things out of proportion. But I don't think it's not that. It's only individuals, and I think the spirit is very high. It's now for that spirit to become bigger.
Sure, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you again for taking out time and sharing your experiences and journey. I'm sure everybody is benefited. We had a good audience on this session, and we look forward to the future and all the best for your future ventures and endeavors.
Thank you, Kalyan. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir.